Hello and welcome to another session of Minnie and Me. My name is Miss Katie and today we're painting a cute little robot. Now keep in mind that I'm going to walk you through how to paint the original painting. However, you can make up your own robot if you want. You can add anything you want, use your imagination and have fun. Now if you purchased a kit from Garden City Arts, then make sure you lay your colors out as you see them here on your foam plate. Grab your yellow canvas, make sure you have a cup of paint water, a piece of chalk, and of course paper towel and your brushes. If you have all those items, you're ready to get started. Okay, step number one, we are going to go ahead and paint the background of our robot. Now I made these little lightning bolt shapes and I made them in a semi-pattern on my canvas. You can do the same or you can do your own thing. It's up to you. So go ahead and crack open color number one. You're going to just jump right into this. And we're going to grab our round brush if you have one. If you don't, you could use a shader brush. That would be a good alternative. Just make sure the brush is kind of nice and small. And then we're going to dip our paintbrush in water, pat it dry on our paper towel so it's nice and damp and cool to the touch. And then grab a little bit of color number one, which is orange paint. After you have your brush loaded up, you can grab a little bit of that orange paint and you can throw it onto your canvas. I'm drawing these little zigzag lines which look like lightning bolts. Now, this orange paint is quite light, so you may have to put a few layers down to build it up. And once you are happy with it, you can just keep adding until your canvas is completely full. I'm going to speed up the video and do that right now. Okay, once your background is nice and dry, we are going to start drawing on your robot. Now I'm going to use gray chalk so that you can see it a little bit better on the canvas. You are going to have white chalk in your kit. So first thing you need to decide, what is your robot going to have? I know my robot's going to have a body and a head for sure, and arms, and maybe a few little gadgets on top of that. So I'm going to start with the body. It is going to go off the canvas, and I'm going to make kind of a almost rectangle shape, except the sides, instead of being straight, kind of taper or point towards the bottom. Next, I'm going to put a rectangle on top, or a square, I should say. Square, rectangle, whatever shape you want, on top of his or her body. And you can make that look any way you like. And remember, you can adjust the lines as well as you go. I'm going to. And then, after we have these two basic shapes, we're going to turn them into forms by adding something onto the sides. Now keep in mind that with your chalk, the reason we use chalk and not a pencil is because it can erase really easily with water. See how easy that comes off? And because when we paint over it, it completely disappears. No one knows you used it. So next, I am going to put a semicircle on the side for the robot's head. Then I'm going to put a thinner long rectangle on the side of the robot's body. I'm going to start with a diagonal line and then follow the side that I made before of the shape. Okay, so I have the basics of my robot. Now I'm going to put on all the fun gadgets. I want him to have a little light on top of his head that lights up when he gets excited. I'm going to add an arm. So the first thing I'm going to do is make a little circle right on the side of his body, and then I will have a long thin tube coming off. That's going to be his arm. Remember, you can erase lines. So this one is going to be a whole circle. This one over here is going to be a half circle. We're not going to see his whole arm, okay? So full circle, half circle. And then off that half circle, I am going to put another tube. If you want to give him an elbow, you can. Okay, that little tube will bend. where his elbow is. And then I have the basic shapes of my robot. You can add more things like ears, maybe it's a little antenna, helps him get Wi-Fi, okay, or whatever else you want. Okay, I'm done with my basic outlining. I'm going to start painting on this next step. Okay, for this next step, we are going to use color number 2, which is the lighter of the 2 grays. Now we are going to use our biggest brush that you have. Most times it'll be a wash brush, like what I'm holding, okay? And you're going to take a little bit of paint after dipping it in paint water, and you're going to take that paint on your foam plate and load up your paintbrush. You can mix water into your paint to make it more fluid by dipping your paintbrush in water and then grabbing a little bit of paint and mixing those two things together. That helps make a nice, smooth painting surface, okay? If you don't mix water in, it might look scratchy and dry. Now, I'm only going to paint these 2 shapes. Do you remember the basic shapes we drew for our robot? Those were his front, okay? We're going to paint just those 2 shapes, and then we'll move on to the sides of his body. So when you're painting, the first thing you want to do is use the top edge of your brush to outline. That makes a nice thin line. So see how I very quickly outlined my shapes. I can go back in and do a better job. Okay, so this is like your guide that helps you fill in or stay within the lines of your robot. After you have those lines, those guidelines, you can use the side of your brush to fill in paint. Okay, so outline first and then fill in with paint. Now once you have those outlines, what you do is you go right up to the line, start at that line, and then bring the paint down and into the center of your object, or your robot in this case. So you're going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to speed up the video and then we'll move on here in a moment. Okay, for the next step, we're going to break open color number 3, and we're going to paint the side of our robot's body. Not the arms, not any of the details, leave all that stuff alone, just the basic shapes, the half circle and the very long thin rectangle of our robot. Now you can continue using a big brush, but remember, if you get into little tiny areas, it might be a good idea to grab a smaller brush. Now I'm going to outline, I'm going to go right up to where I left off with my light gray. This is really important. You don't want to leave gaps, because then you'll have a yellow gap or line in between your robot's parts. Now, do you see how I'm using the top edge of my brush to make an outline? That's your guide to stay inside. And then I want you to watch really closely what I do here. I'm going to go around my robot's shoulder. That's the circle. And just like that. Outline. And then I can fill it in solid. I'm going to fill in his semicircle or half circle up here as well, part of his head, and then we'll be ready to move on. I'm going to speed up the video now. Okay, we're going to move on to color number 4, which is a cadmium red hue, cadmium medium red hue. And we're going to use this color to paint in some details and some of his pieces. So his arms are going to get painted in red, and of course his little button on top if you want to make that. And then if your body is dry enough, you can also paint on the red eyes. Mine might not be dry enough. I may have to wait a minute and then come back and do it later, okay? Remember, you can draw in chalk if you'd like. You can give him 2 eyes, or maybe your robot has a strip or a bar for his eyes, like a rectangle. You can do anything you want. Remember, it's your painting. Now, I'm going to continue using my largest brush, but remember, you can use a smaller brush if you need to. So I'm going to grab my red paint, And once again, we are outlining. We're going right up to wherever we left off with paint, whether it's the dark gray or the light gray when we get to the other side. You outline first and then you fill it in. Now, outlining a circle with a flat brush can be difficult. So if you need to, you can use your round brush, okay? It's up to you and your skill with the brush and your experience with the brush. Some people can do really cool things with brushes after they've had a little bit of practice that aren't as easy for other people. Okay, I'm going to just really quickly outline, block out all of my red pieces of my robot, add some robot eyes here in a moment after my painting is dry enough, and then we'll be able to move on and we can start adding all of the fun details of our robot. Going to speed up the video now. Okay, so we are ready to move on to color number 5. Now this is going to be for his panel on front. Now before we start painting that, let's put in some details with our white chalk on his face and his body. So first thing I'm going to do is make a little green panel, and that is going to be his communication board. Then I'm going to give him some eyebrows because I think it's funny, and a line in between for the start of his nose. I'm going to do a triangle for the rest of his nose, and of course for his voice box, I'm going to put the illusion of some teeth. Okay, now I can also outline his arm, give him little details. I'm going to give him details on the side. I'm going to give him details on this little light up guy. I'm going to do all sorts of different details, and you can do whatever you would like. Now, before we do all those details, let's paint the panel, and we're going to paint it this green color for his little communication board. Now, just like every other time that we've been painting or blocking out shapes, we're going to paint in the outline first and then follow our lines and paint it in solid. I'm going to paint this solid, speed up the video, and then we'll start adding some details in a moment. Okay, so now that we have the green box, we are ready to do some outlining. So when you're doing thin lines, you can use a shader brush. You just turn it to its thinnest point to make the lines, or you can use the round brush. We're going to be using color number 6, and you can also use a little bit of color number 2 for highlights if you would like. So I'm going to start by just showing you a quick tip. You dip your paintbrush in water, mix it into the paint, and what you want to do is dip in water, dip in the paint, and then on the foam plate, mix those two together. This makes your paint nice and fluid. Now, if your brush looks really messy, clean it out. You want to have just paint on the tip of your brush, and the harder you press, the thicker the line will be. If you press light as a feather, barely touching your canvas, you can make thinner lines. So now that I have paint that has some water mixed in, I can go very slowly and do a good job and outline all of my details. Now, outlining is when you basically follow the outer edge of an object to make a contour line. So if I'm outlining the eyes, I'm basically making a circular line that goes around the outside. You can put little details inside those objects with your black paint if you want. It's completely up to you. I'm also going to outline the outer edge of my robot, And you might notice that I am reloading my paintbrush often. And the reason for this is that your paintbrush will start to run out of paint, and it'll start to make really scratchy lines if you don't reload. So I'm going to outline the outer shapes of each thing that I painted in. Inside those shapes, you can add those details like we talked about, little added lines, whatever you'd like. You don't have to necessarily do this if you don't want to, but I think it just makes your robot look really nice and sleek when you do. Now, after you've outlined some of the details, turn your attention to outside your robot. Do you want your robot to have some antennas? Maybe something sticking out from the side of his head? Helps him find Wi-Fi or processes information, okay? You can even paint those in different colors. You could paint them in red. You could paint them in with, color number 3 paint, which is a dark gray paint. Okay, so as you go, remember, this is your robot. You can add super cool details if you want. Add accessories that are going to help your robot with whatever his mission is. Maybe his mission is a helper robot, or maybe he's a scientist robot, okay? So those two types of robots would need very different tools or gadgets. Okay, I'm going to speed up the video and finish outlining, and then we'll move on in just a moment. Okay, so next step, I'm just going to finish up all of the details on my robot. I can use black paint to paint in any details on his communication board. Maybe he has some buttons down here. Maybe he has readouts on how his human is feeling, a mood reader to monitor how his human is doing. Maybe he has some other buttons down here. Also, you could add in little details on his arms. I did these little curvy lines on the previous step. I also painted in darker color on the side, some black lines on the side of my robot's body, because that's kind of what's shadowed. Next, I'm going to break out color number 2, and I'm going to finish all of my details. I'm going to take this color number 2, which is our light gray, and I'm going to use it to add some highlights. I can add highlights to his little antennas. I can add highlights to his little lighty upper thing, whatever that thing is called. I haven't come up with a name for it yet. I can also add highlights to this little board to make it look shiny. And of course, I need to add some highlights to his eyes. It'll help him look a little bit more alive. You can add highlights wherever you'd like. Once you're done with this, guess what? You're finished with this painting. That's it. Just got to add some highlights, make him look even more alive, and then you're finished. I hope you had fun painting. I hope you invented a really cool background story for your robot. If you want to share that with Garden City Arts, please do. You can tag us in your post, or you can send us a message on Facebook. We love seeing your work and hearing the stories behind it. And I hope you have a good rest of your day. Bye.